Well, thank you very much. This whole thing that we are two here is kind of haphazard, but we'll make it work. The Museum of Life and Science has had these butterflies for 19 years. It aptly named its butterfly house Magic Wings because there's all that magic around butterflies that ants quite don't have it, do they?
I think
Or,
they do.
there might, and we might get to that, or the wasp that we unfortunately missed now. I have been the director of the Butterfly House for the last 17 years, and we'll show you a little bit of that. I also brought with me Max.
Oh, cool. My name is Max. I am a deeply emotional person, he said in a deadpan, emotionless voice. And part of what we wanted to do today is to take everybody on kind of an emotional journey. So I would love for everybody to close your eyes, to take a really deep breath together. Ready? Okay. There's a lot of joy because it's really, really good for the soul to be in a room like this. And Uli and I really only have 3 lessons. I'll open my eyes. Uli and I really only have 3 lessons that we want to sort of impart today, but we really want to take everybody on this powerful emotional journey. So I would love for everybody to try and access that part of themselves. Okay, I'm going to give it back to Uli.
When I was asked by Nilda to talk about butterflies, I really was sort of lost a little bit, knowing that you all went to 2nd grade, you all did the life cycle, you all went to high school and college, and most of you are educators, and you are actually teaching that life cycles and the 3 body parts of insects and whatnot. So that's why I asked Max here, who is much better than I at getting to the philosophy of butterflies and why and what and how, and we'll get to that in a moment. To start us off with, we would like you to look at this picture, and I would say, find a word, tell us what you think, what comes to mind, what's wrong, what's right about this. You wanted to do this.
I do want to do this. So this is kind of an inelegant transition, but you will need your phones for this presentation. This is like the one time that you're allowed to do that, right? So everybody take your phone out. And this is just a tiny bit confusing, but you're going to text the number 22333. And what you're going to text to that number is my name. This is really good for my brand. Max Cawley 823. Once you do that, you'll get a text back that says you're part of the conversation now, because we really do want to get some audience input about this picture that we just showed you. And I'll put the picture back up. Does everybody, oh, cool, we're already getting responses. I'll put the picture back up so that you can take a look at it while you start texting. Then we'll take another look. They're starting to come in. Sure. And I'll switch back. We'll give you about 10 more seconds.
Wait, you want to go back?
No. Oh, I had no idea you could do emojis. That is cool.
We're starting to see what kind of people are in the room here. So yes, you see all these positive images that this image evoked. Now we all believe in the intrinsic value of this activity, but then if you ask Max, he'll tell you I'm more sort of the half-empty kind of glass guy. And I would have said, what's wrong with this picture? And it's tons of wrong with this picture. For starters, if we go back to that image for a second, these kids are running crazily in a field. That doesn't happen anymore. That's so unrealistic and dangerous. This is sort of downhill. They come and fall probably, and they will fall into an anthill, get stung and bitten. They won't do that on their own. The other thing is they don't have cell phones, so there's something wrong with that image. It's obviously a stock photo that I lifted somewhere, and credit to the one that took it, whoever that was. There are a bunch of pictures that Max and I will show you that are Googled, fair warning, but there are some that are from our butterfly curator. When it comes to the butterflies, there are some that are my own that come here. So what else is wrong with this? They're running. We do want them to engage in nature, right? If they run, they just don't learn anything other than what scraped knees feel like, or maybe what that broken screen of a cell phone will cost them when it busts on the floor. Oh, yeah, he has one of those.
That's true.
Once back to the words, maybe, the word cloud finished. Just to take that full in, it's fun, cool, freedom. All we see is play, not much learning. Not true, of course. I know that now. I guess we need another slide.
Sure.
So as educator, we're supposed to instill this and increase the awareness of the world around us. If we do well, we might get that to an appreciation for the natural world. We all know that, you all know that, and at the museum, we do try to foster all that. And in the process, maybe transfer a little bit of knowledge, tidbits about the bugs and animals that we show you, or the physical world as well. The ways we do this, I can stand here and talk to you. Boring for adults. You with your kids will not have much success with that. So we can throw in a few videos and pictures just to excuse to have some more technology thrown in there, or have even an online survey. Everybody can use their cell phone. Hurrah, we are much better off. For kids, of course, we create these curated, semi-curated experiences, be it, sorry, going in and out here, being at a playground or something, or a garden that you have created at your home institutions, with hands-on activities that are very structured or less structured. And then, of course, free exploration and play that you may have seen in that particular image, which ultimately there is all the science that says will teach them much more naturally, will be much more engrossing, and it'll stick to them, whatever they learn. So the museum, as I told you, and probably our exhibits designer last year, or the president before that were here, showed you this picture. This is one of our experiences that the museum has created. It's called Hideaway Woods. People are supposed to run and scream, high impact activity, a lot of exploration in the water, in the stream, on these tree houses, catch and tag and all that. And yes, in the end, at the end of the day, as that thing down there on our sign says, you should smell like dirt. Nothing finer. But when we get to this more biology part of our teaching, what we want to do is not have this running and boisterous activity that you always have in gardens. Yes, that frog catching and running and screaming is always great, but one of our colleagues recently told me this little quote: to appreciate nature, you have to first notice it. If you run around like these kids were doing in that field, fat chance they will not notice nature much other than that scraped knee or the grass or the ant that bites them. So apart from that fear thing, there will get little to do out there. So to notice, you have to slow down. And here we are getting a little towards those butterflies, and what maybe Maxwell should talk to you a little more about as well. You have to get up close, difficult with butterflies, unless you have a butterfly house like we do. Observe and engage. That's what we all want, and what we, in this case, sometimes achieve beautifully. So this picture on your left just happened 2 weeks ago, and this was a super chaperone. Not all of them, parents that come with their kids, are really that well in tune. But these two little girls were watching, in this case, it was a bee, so not even a butterfly, which would be bigger and better. They were doing this exploration. The bee was there pollinating, not pollinating, probably just gathering pollen. And the educator was actually engaging and trying to steer that encounter. So there we are. This is what we want to do. And here's another stock photo, totally unrealistic and kitschy almost, but that's what we try to do.
Cool. How's everybody feeling? Remember, we're going on this emotional journey together. Before we continue with learning about some strategies for getting kids outside, on learning about and with butterflies, on creating a rich outdoor learning environment, we first have to acknowledge a few things about how people learn, and in particular, how they learn about animals. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but your learners are not blank slates. They come into your learning environment with a wealth of experience and background that helps to build their future knowledge. They also come into your program with a wealth of context that is based on pre- and misconceptions, incomplete understandings, or maybe even misinformation. Now, I have actually brought two animals with me here today. They're right behind me here. Aren't they cool? Okay, there's a small problem. They both have names, but I've forgotten which one is named which. One of them is named Kiki. Can everybody say Kiki? Very cool. The other one is named Bauba. Can everybody say Bauba? Excellent. Can everybody show me your index finger? Index finger. Okay, cool. With your index finger, I would love for you to point to the one you think is named Kiki. We're going to do that on the count of 3. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Take a look around. Interesting. Now, on the count of 3, let's point to Bauba. 3, 2, 1. Take another look around. Very interesting. So we've come to a sort of general consensus here, right? This is actually well documented. It is called the Kiki-Bauba effect, right? And about 90% of the general public agree with the kind of general consensus that we came up with here, right? We can pretty easily figure out which one is Kiki and which one is Bauba. But why? There's some kind of non-arbitrary mapping going on here with regards to just sounds, shapes, and colors. It actually works with a lot of other words, too. The initial experiment was for two names, Taketi and Baluba. Do you think you can find those ones? Right? It works with more real-sounding names like Kate and Molly. Can you find those ones? And it even works with characteristics and attributes. Can you point to the one that you think is more easygoing? Can you point to the one that is more determined? Yeah, it's weird, right? So hopefully this demonstrates that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in your brain and in your learners' brains that we don't quite understand. There's a lot of this non-arbitrary sort of fogginess going on. There's a large width and breadth of sort of deep mystery going on in learners' brains in educational settings. And if we can't even come into a program without preconceptions about two animals that I drew in MS Paint earlier today, what does this mean about the rest of the programs we do, especially animals who children have a lot of pre- and misconceptions about? We like to think of ourselves as rational creatures, that we consider evidence, we make observations, we weigh our findings, we make decisions based on our rationality. This is most likely not true, right? A lot of how we think and make decisions rests in this non-arbitrary fogginess, rests in deep emotions. And emotions are a really, really, really important part of how we learn. Let's check out this next photo. When you see something, raise your hand. Don't tell the person next to you. But when you see something, you can raise your hand. We're not looking for the trees. We're not looking for the trees. Sorry to any tree biologists. Interesting. Okay, let's try another one. Same condition. When you see something, raise your hand. Okay. a little bit faster the second time, right? Some of it probably has to do with the fact that we were practiced and primed for it. But humans, for some reason, some non-arbitrary reason, have an incredible ability to spot animals. In tests where people are asked to spot appearing and disappearing animals, plants, and buildings, which one did they find first? Animals. We are incredible at finding animals, and we find them with far more consistency and speed than any other variable. But why? We don't really have a great idea. There's a theory that we call atavism. Everybody say atavism. Cool. Which says that humans evolved to be able to spot animals. It has to do with our ancestors. And for some reason or another, it might be built into our genetic makeup. There's another theory that we call enculturation. Everybody say that word. Excellent, which says that we learn both directly and indirectly from our parents, our peers, from society, that we are able to do this because we believe it's important to do. Which one do you believe? I don't know. One thing is clear, it is consistent. There's another layer to this. We are even better and faster at spotting animals that we have strong emotional connections to, especially those we have aversive emotions to, like fear and disgust. Take a look at these two. Those percentage points were the points of people who were not able to see it at that point. So at the bottom, 0%, everybody was able to spot the animal. But look at how much more quickly people were able to spot snakes than they were able to find this bird. Emotions indeed play an incredibly important role in our relationships and our learning about animals. Some of this is relatively well understood. Our connections to our pets is actually pretty well studied. What about wildlife? What about pests? Empathy is a really, really hot topic right now in the zoo and aquarium world. And it's the subject of some really fascinating study. Now, some research suggests that humans are able to build what we think of as empathy fairly consistency with animals like our pets, like dogs and cats and stuff like that. But what about, can you build empathy with this animal? Can you build empathy with this animal? I would say that YouTube has had a really profound effect in how we think about animals, right? Like, the number of cute and funny animal videos that I watch, never at work, has had a really profound impact on my life, right? Almost all of those are mammals. Does anybody know how many species of mammals there are in the world? The last authoritative published checklist said that there are 5,416 species of mammals. That's everything from the bumblebee bat, the star-nosed mole, the blue whale, humans, your cats, your dogs, all that stuff. 5,416. Keep that in mind. Okay, let's stick with this theme of emotions, and let's continue to explore some emotions. We're going to go back to that word cloud, and I apologize for how not elegant this is, but here's another one. Use a word to describe butterflies. You are allowed to talk to your neighbors about it too, so it's not just silent. So I bet we all have a hunch as to what some of these might end up being, right? A lot of the words that we use to talk about butterflies have to do with their aesthetic and emotional qualities that we value for them. So words like colorful, words like delicate, beautiful, gorgeous, magnificent, that's a great word. Fluttery, that's also a great word. So a recent survey surveyed about 750 people all over the world as to their emotions regarding different species of invertebrates, different species of bugs. Butterflies were one of them, and actually butterflies scored the top. So from the survey asked people to rank them from -5, which is super aversive, that you hate those animals, to 5, being that you loved those animals. Butterflies were all the way up at the top at about 4.3. They also asked them to describe those words, or to describe butterflies, and they used a lot of the same words that we are using right now. Words that describe their beauty, or how delicate, or how colorful they are, which speak to a real, powerful emotional connection that we have. Are there words describing butterflies' utility? Is there any teleology here? Is there anything about how important ecologically they are? Very cool, absolutely. And pollinators, I love that it made it in here, but it is kind of a small one next to a lot of the other ones. I like that scary made it in here too. That's really interesting. Let's consider some other animals that were in this survey, one of them being bees. Bees also rated really, really high. They were at about 3.7. But the words that people used to describe bees were really different. They used words like useful and pollinator. People like bees and butterflies is something that we learned from this study. But they liked them for really different reasons. And we can kind of understand that, right? So Uli and I thought it would be a great idea to bring a box and do a butterfly release like we do at the museum with some butterflies. Doesn't that sound cool? Now imagine if this box was filled with bees instead of butterflies. Right? We like bees and we like butterflies, but we probably wouldn't like to do a bee release in this room. Okay, I'll put this back. We can now consider one of the closer relatives to both of them, which are wasps. Wasps scored the lowest in this. They scored at about -4.1. Most of the words that people use to describe wasps, I cannot even repeat in polite company, right? But why? So how many species of wasps are there? I asked you to keep that number of mammals in mind, right? 5,416 species of mammals, in case on the off chance we forgot. There are right now more than 100,000 described species of wasps. There are probably another 100,000 out there waiting to be described for the first time, right? How many species of wasps do we often come into contact with? Maybe a dozen, maybe a little more than that. And wasps are a really, really interesting species, right? Or group of species, because they have this incredible amount of diversity. Keep in mind that wasps are not only animals like yellow jackets, who again, maybe you've been stung by a yellow jacket before, but does anybody in here like figs? Cool, fig Newtons are really, really good. How many species of fig trees are there? It's about 800 species of fig trees. Fig trees only have one pollinator. Anybody know what their pollinator is? It's wasps. It's fig wasps. Each one of the 800 species of fig trees has a very specific species of fig wasp that goes along with it. They are evolved alongside each other, and they need each other. No fig wasps, no figs, no figs, no fig wasps. Cool. So, interestingly, because of some of the way that they are pollinated, many of the figs that you eat, which we call the female figs, have a wasp that accidentally burrowed inside of them and dissolved inside of them because they couldn't get back out. So keep that in mind next time you eat a fig. Human attitudes towards wasps, and really any animal, are really, really reductive, and they are much more influenced by our emotions, which are heavily influenced by mythology. It's likely that if you asked somebody about bees 12 years ago, before colony collapse disorder became this really big thing, people would have had a much more negative attitude towards bees, kind of like they do towards wasps. But attitudes change for a number of reasons, and just one of the reasons that they change is because we learn more things about them. Now, this is not to say that learning and knowledge are directly correlated to us changing our attitudes, because there are a lot of things that go into that. But sometimes, when you think about the chemistry that goes into making something make us feel good about something versus making us feel bad about something. Learning something new, something surprising, something amazing about them may start a cascade of mental changes that eventually leads us to change our attitude and also leads to a change of behavior and change in habits. I hope that that fig wasp thing started to change. So we will actually now be opening up a box filled with wasps. Okay, joke landed. I feel good. What can we learn from butterflies? We know that we've got a lot of emotional connections already, and these are really often reinforced, right? And Uli will talk about this in just a moment. But what kind of intellectual connections can we build? So let's explore some of the butterfly utility. Pollinator was on there already, which I think is awesome. What is probably the most ecologically and useful, important role that butterflies fill in an ecosystem? Anybody know? They're food. Butterflies are a really, really, really important food source in their larval stage. On the count of 3, if you know what we call the larval stage of a butterfly, you can say it. Ready, 3, 2, 1. Caterpillar, very cool. Caterpillars are really, really important food sources for a lot of different animals, but especially for animals like birds. Along with producing food for animals, caterpillars also, really importantly, create a nutrient-rich, we could call it food for plants. I'm referring to, of course, what we call frass, which is the excrement of boring insects. So frass is a really, really important piece in the creation of compost and the spread of fungi into the soil layer, and is an important component in fertilizer. Plus, frass is such a good word to say. Everybody say frass. Really fun. Okay, butterflies are, of course, pollinators, and this is indeed true. But let's take that with a grain of salt. Butterflies ain't bees, they ain't wasps. They do not pollinate on the same level as either of these groups in breadth or scale, but it's worth noting that they have kind of that fig and fig wasp relationships with a lot of plants. Can you imagine anybody else who could pollinate this plant right here? Right? So no really special butterfly with a really special proboscis, no really special plant. I think that's a really good place to go to. Let's talk about their proboscis. Their probosci are really, really interesting adaptations. And instead of just talking about it, because Uli said that we shouldn't just lecture, right? Let's take a closer look at it. And let's take an even closer look at it. Isn't that cool? Okay, I don't need to say anything else about the proboscis. Okay, adult butterflies, like the one in this photograph, also sometimes serve as food for animals. Sometimes. And there's a caveat here. Are you ready to see a picture taken 12 minutes later? This blue jay learned a really important lesson, that butterfly that it ate was highly toxic. Lots and lots of butterflies pull toxins out of their food and transfer it into their tissue. So importantly, even though this blue jay may not have known before that it wasn't supposed to eat this toxic butterfly, it certainly will not make the same mistake. Animals are pretty good at making decisions based off of really, really aversive experiences like vomiting up a toxic butterfly, right? Let's go. Oh, Uli, this one's your slide. Come on up.
Well, this is just one that, to get you back to reality. On butterflies, I threw together. And again, there's this Google part. So butterflies are trusted. That's the big thing that we eventually in this whole talk probably should get across as something that everybody likes, loves, appreciates. And so pretty much anything that you can ever buy in a gift shop over there at the museum or wherever will have a butterfly motif printed on it. You will never find me in a suit like that, probably, unless it's cheap. We trust our lives with them. We trust our sleep with the butterfly. Just think about that wasp or the scorpion again. You would never find a guy that would sleep happily with that on his shoulder.
Would love to see the Facebook is breaking up with news with a guy holding a scorpion.
You even trust that one. But of course, mostly, back to the philosophy part, there is so much lore, folklore, and associated with butterflies that we automatically think it's nature, it's beautiful, it's safe. And of course it has this transformation that is not just the one that butterflies do. Wasps and ants do, pupate or whatever, can be one of those things of all the other insect world critters. Show you a few little things, I guess. Go, 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 go. Oh, no, this is the history of...
Yeah, let's go back in time. How long ago did butterflies and moths emerge? About 190 million years ago, right? So the first one was most likely a moth, but actually most of the common ancestors to all the butterflies and moths that we have right now came from about 65 million years ago. What do we know happened about 65 million years ago? If you said mass extinction event, you're right. So butterflies and moths also did not make out super well in this mass extinction event, and from those, we can sometimes still find pieces of butterflies in our geologic timescale, though they are not very well represented. Most of the pieces that we do have were encased in amber, which I think is really fascinating. These are some pieces of a scale from a butterfly's wing that were encased in amber. Right now it is thought to be the oldest common ancestor to butterflies and moths. How many, after this mass extinction event, there were not very many left, right? How many butterflies and moth species do we have today? So remember, 5,416 species of mammals. Right now, there are 220,000 described species of butterflies and moths, right? So that 1 in 10 of all living described species, including things like plants and fungi, is a butterfly or a moth. So they make up 1/10 of all living species. They are the second largest order in class Insecta. Anybody know what the first is? It's beetles. Beetles. There are more species of beetles than there are species of plants, which is pretty cool. So that post-apocalyptic vision that we have of bugs taking over the world, you're most likely already there. They already control the world. Okay. By the way, there are 44 times more species of butterflies and moths than there are species of mammals in the world, which I think is fascinating. Cool. Uli, this one's yours too.
Yeah, but we go through those a little faster. We have 5 minutes. These are some of the species you can see in our butterfly house, so I won't harp on them because some of you went there, were there, have been, or will go there maybe this afternoon. Back to the beautifulness of everything. This is why we love them.
Cool. Turn to the person next to you. You have about 10 seconds to think about this question. Anybody know? The best predictor of your college major is your college roommate freshman year. And this speaks to a fact that probably will not be surprising to most of us, right? Science and learning is social. We learn a lot about ourselves, about other things from the people who are around us. You have an opportunity to now help shape this, not only through learning about butterflies and science and the outdoors, but also to get in really early in other people's lives and help shape their identity. And I heard this past weekend, and when I thought about this amazing quote, I thought, man, I just have to tell everybody at this conference about it. So I decided that I was going to steal it. But it's this idea that being really into science is an identity. And it's an out identity. And like other out identities, it will put people, and especially kids, into identity boxes. And this is even harder to reconcile and deal with if you're already in other out identity boxes. That is to say that folks who are from marginalized communities, people who are already underserved by STEM and science fields, are going to have an even harder piece with this piece of their identity unless we, as a room right now, decide to do something about that. Now, this, I think, is a really important piece of our work because there's this idea that science, the way that I learned about it, was being done by people who are smarter than you, and that's not true, right? Now, we can probably agree that this guy over here is really, really smart, but he tells a story from before he became the most off scientist in history, that he used to really love beetles, and he'd go around and he'd collect beetles when he was younger, and he was walking through the woods, and he scooped up a beetle to add to his collection, and he was really happy with it, and he scooped up another one, and he was really happy with that one, and he started heading back really happy with his new beetles to add to his collection, and what happened? Saw another beetle that he needed to have. Now, Darwin had 2 hands, so what did he decide to do? Well, he took this beetle in this hand and he popped it into his mouth. Now, this beetle that he popped into his mouth, he did not know was what we call a bombardier beetle. Bombardier beetles, and this is from their description, when disturbed, they eject a hot, noxious chemical spray from the tip of their abdomen. So Darwin described not being able to taste properly from his mouth for a really long time afterwards, but the worst part was that he lost all 3 beetles from that day. Enough about beetles, though. Here's another amateur scientist who did a lot of really important work. This is Vladimir Nabokov. And Nabokov had this not-so-secret piece of his identity where he loved butterflies. And Nabokov, while he was exiled from Russia, went and he lived in Spain. And in Spain, collected a whole bunch of different species and began to get really, really good at it. And began to take a really up-close look. And we're all adults in this room, or at least we are older children, right? So I'll tell you, he began to look really closely at butterfly genitalia. And actually, butterfly genitalia are really, really poorly understood even right now. So if you are looking for a change in career, there is a lot of space in that field. So he began looking at the genitalia of these butterflies and through his examinations discovered that indeed he did not think that these blue butterflies were from a common ancestor. Instead, he thought that these blue butterflies came actually from 5 different ancestors. And he took this work and he wrote a whole bunch down about it and he turned it into a group of scientists who were studying butterflies. And they said, oh, that's really nice. And they put it into a cabinet and they left it there. And Nabokov eventually passed away. But very recently they went back, looked at the work, and we can now do that with the help of really advanced DNA technology. They found out that he was most likely correct, right? So they shelved away this work because he was not a recognized scientist. And in doing so, they missed an opportunity to do some really, really important research about the evolutionary history of butterflies. And I want to tell these stories because there's this idea out there that science is already finished, or that it's being done by people who are smarter than you or who are elsewhere than you. And I really want to reject that idea. And I think this is a really, really important thing that butterflies can do for us. I'm going to skip ahead a couple of slides here, because I want to get to one really important point. And that one really important point is, got a couple of slides I'm going to miss. Uli already talked about the value in slowing down, but butterflies can also do a really important thing in teaching us about humility, that we are a part of an incredibly complex system, and that we can learn a lot from learning our place in that system from butterflies. The last thing that they can teach us is, like the mystery of the butterfly genitalia, which remains something that we don't understand very well, butterflies have a lot to teach us about embracing enduring mystery about the world. And they can teach a lot of your learners about that mystery as well, which I think is really fascinating. If you take anything from here, I hope it is that there is still so much that we don't understand, and that it isn't someone else who's going to figure that stuff out. It's you. It's us. It's your students. And it's not when they grow up, but it's starting right now. When we embrace the mystery of the world, somehow everything else will start to make a lot more sense. The world is this really grand story made up of small and important stories, like the wasps crawling into figs, like the butterflies you see in your backyard. All of these are waiting to be discovered and waiting to be told, right? Now, I've long wondered if storytelling was a good way to talk about science, or if science was a good way to do storytelling. Here's what I've found. Whichever way works better for you is true. As long as you know that those two, science and storytelling, are inextricably and inexorably tied together. Now go outside with your kids and find that story. Thanks, y'all.